Cool, thanks.
Hey, I'm Chris Eishen, and this is the Modern Dad Council. Joining me so far today is Jay Forty of the Greatness Zone and Ready for Life, and Eric Lehman of the Game Changer Movement. And I'm Chris Eishen. The Modern Dad Council meets to discuss important issues around parenting, relationships, and everything else in the world around being a modern dad. So today we're discussing American Pride. It's 4th of July weekend, and so I want to talk about that. Like, how do we talk to our kids about pride in America, pride in our country, pride in the decisions that our government's making, and then even, just pride in ourselves and in our families. So welcome, Jay and Eric.
Hey, Chris.
And happy 4th of July.
Thank you.
So does any one of you want to kind of start us off and kind of share what comes to mind when you think of the 4th of July and pride, and whether it be country or whatever, how you define that?
Eric, you want to start?
Oh gosh, well, I feel that pride is a very interesting word for me, and even patriotism is a very interesting thing for me. So I'm still kind of like in processing. Like I love this holiday. I love in a way that we're not celebrating like Memorial Day and all these like other holidays like that are harder for me. So for some reason there's a lightness around Independence Day. But I guess a lot of my friends, want to rename it Interdependence Day, and I feel like there's a tremendous opportunity for that inquiry, especially in the light of the weird irony of the Supreme Court decision. And the reason why I call it ironic is that I wake up every morning thinking that every human has a right to show up however they are, and yet here we are in 2015, and we think history was just made, and indeed it was. But I'm kind of in this weird I don't know, challenge. Like, what does it mean to be an American? Like, that we have to wait until 2015 for the ship to be righted in this way, what in the eyes of the government. So
that brings up a really good point and a thought to my mind about the process that things go through to become laws, right? So how involved are we in the decisions that are made on what becomes laws, and how is this process slowed based, because for an example, this healthcare thing, the Obamacare, we'll call it, okay, because that's what seems to be on the news. Like, they did a poll on Facebook or something of who the percentage of people that were for the Obamacare and people that were against it. And it was like an overwhelming 70-some% were against it. And yet that somehow became, a thing in our government, like that got pushed through. Even though, yeah, it's a poll on Facebook, but still polling was done, and it was shown that the majority of the country was against this. So is our government, is there a way that we can fix that process with the technology that exists today to kind of answer or address your point there, Eric? That you've got people of a majority thinking one way, and yet it's taking till 2015 for this stuff to actually become a law.
Well, I don't want to cut off Jay, but I think the technology is here for us to just click on our smartphones and have a global referendum if we want to, and so it's not technology that's slowing us down. It's there's a systemic lag, that as far as I'm concerned, this is like several thousand years late, So I don't know if it's just a technological argument, for any one thing. But I mean, we still in 2015 have electoral college, that helps, decide states, rather than just counting it to the number,
Yeah.
So I could go on and on about that, which is why I'm, I don't even know where to go, like, because I love this holiday, but I don't necessarily associate American pride with it. So I don't know. It's
Well, it's interesting. Oh, Jay, you know what? I'm gonna give you a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take it in a different direction. I think it is a point of pride that it's a way of celebrating that independence doesn't mean we got it all figured out. It means that we've decided that where we were wasn't where we needed to be, and life is one big experiment. Do we have the pride in our own decision-making process that we can be heard, and that for the most part, because it isn't perfect, it's that great expression, it's perfectly imperfect, that the best that we can do is show up and look at things, be present enough to say, oh, is this where we need to be? And be aware enough that we have built systems that we could be proud in, that we can move it if it's wandering away from where it needs to be. And with over 300 million people in a country, why would we all agree on anything first? But are there some things that we take pride in that we all should agree on, like everybody should be who they really are, or that kind of thing? That fundamental to our Constitution was the ability for us to self-actualize, self-realize. And that didn't mean I get to have more houses and more cars. It meant I had the opportunity to live in a country that allowed me to discover what it is that I do best and try and bring that. And some of the early founders, I remember, in reading some things about this, that was what they were looking for, this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness wasn't to see who could be the wealthiest. It was, do I have the opportunity in this country safely and freely to be who I'm supposed to be? And I like that. I mean, I love that from a thinking standpoint. And looking at the rest of the world, I think we should have great pride, whether we deliver it or not. That's our intention. And it takes some time to work it through because everybody's got an opinion, and that's cool. Some opinions seem to carry more financial clout, which makes them heavier opinions. Okay, well, we'll catch up with that someday maybe voices should matter more than bucks. But at least in our country, as we watch the rest of the world, there are things that we get to work through without huge amount of violence. Though, I get that this is probably the wrong week to say that with the shooting in South Carolina, but when you watch the rest of the world try and navigate new directions to catch up and be proud about who they are, they don't do it real well. For all that we can show the world, one of the things I think we do really well is we get to dissent rationally. We don't have to have a mob and a fire and a bomb when things don't go our way. And yeah, sometimes the factions do, but most of us are really good about, no, that's not how it's going to be. We're not going to have it like that. So to me, I think there's a great reason to be proud over this. Not always that we do it right, but that we mean to do it right. And what are the ways of us stepping in and spending this weekend reminding ourselves that, for all that's not right, like with ourselves, there's always more right than what's wrong. So let's focus on what's right. And part of that is we broke away from a country that was basically, well, I'm going to call it a dictatorship, but okay, a royalty, and from that we created something that was far more democratic. It's not perfect. It's evolving, but could we take pride this weekend that we've made some really good decisions?
For ourselves and our country.
To show the world, yeah, that it could be done differently. It could be done differently. And for some reason, everybody looks to us like we have all the answers. And what we, I think, are getting better at is asking some really tough questions. And being okay with spending some time in question instead of always having the answer.
Mm-hmm. Now, I spent some time growing up in Italy. My dad lived there for 6 years, so I got to really understand that culture. And then to come back to the United States, and you see the differences in culture and the differences in freedoms that the two countries had, and there were a lot of the Italian culture I envied, because I don't know very many people in my life at all that really have a strong cultural background still. Like, my grandparents had a little bit of German culture kind of in their day-to-day routine, but that didn't kind of carry into my parents' life, right? And so when you're in Italy and you're living their culture, it's kind of a neat to see how they live. But then you get to see where over there they have their government. When you get in an accident with your car, you don't call the police, wait for them to show up. They write a report. You don't really count on police protection on a day-to-day basis, really. And at least when I was there, the mob had a very strong presence. Like, our police station in my parents' town was blown up, but I never felt unsafe or anything like that. It was that happened in the middle of the night, and it was like a retaliation for something that going on in politics. And somewhere in Sicily, a bridge was blown up, and some big official was crossing the bridge, and that was an assassination. So these things like that happened, which in America you think, holy smokes, I can't believe something like that would happen. But that's kind of how they handled things over there. Over here, we have a police force that breaks in your door and throws your mom and dad in prison because they're growing pot in the backyard. And now they're serving 30 years in prison for it.
I'm trying to. How is that helping us on Pride, Chris?
Right. Well, I'm just saying there's differences in culture. So I come back to the United States and I'm like, oh man, it's so cool that we live in a country that has, I don't have to worry about the police station getting blown up. But now we're starting to see there's a little bit of fear that somebody might come into some place and start shooting up the place. And that's not something that America ever had before, and the rest of the world has kind of had these kind of issues going on, and we just haven't seen that before. And so it's interesting to see our reaction to these things happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe as we're changing the world is changing us too. And how might we stay in a little firmer about what we consider okay and not okay. And maybe that's the conversation we have with our kids about what is it like to really be a citizen here? With rights come responsibilities. So what are the rights that you have and what are the responsibilities that you have? I challenge parents everywhere to talk about that with their kids. What is it like to be here? And so what are the blessings and what are the challenges? And for that, for the overall safety that you get here, for the overall fact that virtually things work here not the way they are. I studied in Italy for a while too, and every now and then the Italians would just go on sciopero, which means strike. So you're waiting to take your bus home, and they're like, nope, today's the day we're on strike. And you would have to find a way home in the middle of the afternoon or in the middle of the night. So, I mean, everybody does it a little bit differently, and I think there's an awful lot that Americans have that maybe we don't realize are really pretty remarkable. And so to start this, and it's not just about the political system, though I think there's obviously some changes we could make in that, but the fact of what is life like every day for us versus life like every day for other people. And how are we not aware, could we be more aware and more grateful of it? And in that, could we see in the process with our kids and draw attention to it that, hey, not every place on the planet looks like this. Not every place on the planet has Wi-Fi no matter where you go, from a Starbucks to your car to everything else. So you get to hook on your game and be everywhere that you want. That's not what it's like everywhere. And, you at age 14, have already been working for 6 years in some other countries. And here we won't let you work yet because there are rules that say you're too young. So, I mean, all of that just could go into a discussion about rights and responsibilities. And I wonder, and like I said at the beginning, my challenge to parents is how do we use this weekend not just to eat hamburgers and hot dogs and go to a parade that really is a bunch of marching bands and Boy Scouts, but rather ask our kids, so what is this really all about, and how do you make it personal for you?
Mm.
Mm.
I
guess
know I just was a killjoy on everybody's weekend.
no, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like I feel like we're in this transition, and I feel like eventually there's sort of gonna be like a set of global holidays that might actually replace any one country's holidays, because I think with technology and all these enhancements, and I don't know if we talked about it at all last week, but like I just learned that when America took a stand, and what I mean by that is like when George Bush wanted stem cell research not to happen here, because of his beliefs, like technology didn't skip a beat, it just moved. So like it just went to a country where it was more permissible, and I feel like that might actually happen with our youth. And I mean, I don't even mean to be a wet blanket, because I haven't been in any other country but here, so I don't, I'm, I'm excited that I get to dissent in a way, but I'm also impatient, because with the technology we have, I want us to be humans rather than Americans, as quickly as humanly possible, if that makes sense. So with all that said, like, there's a kid I met in Ithaca, who had these amazing skills on a bicycle, like where he was able to jump and do all these amazing things that hardly anyone in the United States can do. But he learned that there's a tribe of people, like in England, that does it. So like he's trying to convince his parents to support his dream, because no one in the States is doing exactly what he's doing and actualizing the way that he's actualizing. And it's a very interesting question. So like, are we global citizens and just kind of mired in sort of a cultural lag, and when does that transition happen, and what does it look like, and how do we, as the modern dads or whoever we identify as, like, become on the front lines of that, so I don't know. I mean, like, I'm excited, I mean, I've always lived in the States, so I don't have any other perspective, but I think we can grow up faster if we want to, and I guess, even last week, watching Walmart decide to like take their Confederate flags down and off the market so much more quickly than the state buildings in South Carolina, you know what I mean? Like, I think as much as it is good to point out, what's available here, I think I think we're being exposed as well, like, I mean, I think, just like what you said with this, Obamacare, I mean, if 70% of the nation doesn't want it and it's written into law anyway, what does that mean? Do we really have what the founders of our country, thought that they were giving us, like a representative government? Do we have that? Like, so I don't know. Like, if we really dove into it, like, I would love to have a conversation with my kids to see, what they think being an American is. So,
actually, I think that's the question for the show today. Is how do we talk to our kids about, how do we ask our kids what it means to them, rather than influence them by saying, here's what it is. But they're products of every moment of technology and every moment of information that's out there. What do they hear, and what do they talk about when it? Are they proud to be an American? And if so, what does that mean? What does pride mean, and what does proud to be an American mean? And if they're not, why not? Who shouldn't be proud of their country? And sometimes it happens because our countries do things because we don't always agree with where they go and what they do. But if we're not proud of our country, then what are the options? Do we stay? Do we modify it? How do we modify it? Could we even modify it? And then I think we're starting to feel what it feels like to be some of the rest of the world, you know, where they see the manic stuff going on with the huge amount of bribes and horrific behavior that it takes to get anything done. To looking that, you know, most days we don't have to bribe anybody to get to the store, buy something at the store, and come home. You know, we just don't have to, but in certain points in the rest of the world you do. And so I wondered if, you know, the conversation is one to have, you know, me with family meetings. So I is watching Eric's reaction to that. So
I love
family
family meetings. I'm all for family meetings.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah,
at all cynical about it.
Cool. And just a way of assembling everybody to say, and then do whatever you want at the family meeting. But to me, it would be, hey, here's an opportunity that a holiday's here. What does it mean to you? And why is that? You know, what's the rest of the world saying about it? What are your friends saying about it? But moreover, I really want to know what you think about it. And again, I'm back to that. You know, if our job as parents are to be guides and loving teachers, then, you know, what opportunity does this weekend present to us other than how many times and how many hours, how many times can you go in the pool and how many hours can you stay there? And you know, we've diluted a lot of our holidays down to that. It's just one more time we don't have to work and we get to hang out with our friends and have a barbecue. And I love that. We should celebrate every moment that we can. Can we just spend a couple of minutes and talk about why we celebrate? And in that, could we expand the thinking and or challenge the thinking? That maybe what comes from this is a kid who now becomes aware that no, they want to have a voice in this government, and you know, we've just shifted them out of the accounting job that everybody thought they were going to have, and now they want to do political science and they want to be in government because they're passionately connected to having a voice in due process, and they may. And maybe that wouldn't have come out at any other point had not a holiday made us stop and notice, hey, wait a minute, what's different about this weekend? And with that, could we be a little bit better guides and loving teachers to our kids by, you know, challenging what they think?
And you know, I mean, I guess I want to piggyback, you know, because I think just some kind of aligned insight is showing up, and I guess what's amazing about being an American is that we are on paper allowed to dissent, you know, and above and beyond that, that we can, in a way, like what I'm learning in business, I think might also be appropriate in government, is that like if you don't disrupt your business right now, if you don't figure out what it means to be disrupted, you will be disrupted by someone else.
Right.
And I feel like we've seen that time and time and again, like with business. Like we've seen, you know, the same year that Kodak went out of business, Instagram was sold, you know, by 13 people to Facebook for $1 billion. So, you know, and I feel like, you know, if we look at disruption and we look at government the same way, you know, there's a major opportunity to disrupt government right now. And you know, I guess the question is, like, we either disrupt ourselves or someone will do it for us.
Well,
you know,
look at who's running for Jeb Bush is running for the Republican seat. It's like, are you kidding me? How many of your family members have to be president? Like, something's not right there. That anyway. I guess I don't want to get into all that, but
yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't about politics, because I think you know, part of why we celebrate this weekend is because of the nature of the type of government that we have. And at any point in time, our government is up for discussion. It must be, and that's what you're talking about, right, Eric? That the disruption that you're talking about isn't, you know, we're going to storm it and everybody has guns. It's rather, how do we bring up things that are not in line with what we think are supposed to be in line? And are we watching our own world to challenge the decisions that we make, or to applaud the fact that sometimes, our biased consensus isn't in favor of what the founding fathers really meant, and if we're living to our Constitution. And I know there's a lot of challenge between Christian perspectives and equality in marriage, but it's a healthy conversation to have, and that we can have it without everybody always losing their cool, or everybody thinking that the only thing they can do is brandish a gun and take out the people who oppose them. And we would find that in many other parts of the world. So,
And we're starting to see that now, I think.
I think so, and maybe that's because as much as we've been shining our world onto the rest of the world shines back onto us, and we see that many other places in the world solve their challenges, or attempt to, by getting rid of the other side's perspective, by getting rid of the other side. And so we do need to be more vigilant around, what serves us in a healthy and democratic approach that says your voice matters, and mine doesn't matter any more than yours, but mine certainly doesn't matter any less than yours. And what would it take for us to have a conversation about something that you and I disagree on, to see if there's common ground, or if both of us could make some kind of avenue towards something bigger and better than either of our perspectives. And to me, that's the experiment part of what I think our country is. We're a proving ground here. We're a petri dish, and we're growing things. And sometimes you go, "Ooh, didn't want that," and other times, like, "Man, that's amazing how that happened." And so I think we ebb and flow, and every now and then we get the chance to have a correction called an election. Or an improvement, or the maintenance of something we think we're on the right road, keep it going. But you have to justify it. And that, I think, is healthy, and this holiday reminds us that that's what we do.
Jay, I have a question for you. You're working now with the city of Fort Lauderdale with your leadership program.
Yep.
And that's a government program, right?
I don't know what you mean by government program.
Like it's done by the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Mm-hmm. The city pays for the next education to help the next generation of leaders learn how to be a leader and do a community service project in the process.
So how is a program like that funded? Because to me, I think that's like a really powerful thing that our government is doing for the next generation, and I'd love to see something along the lines of a program like that in every major city, helping, people really find their fit in the world. So, and then how to step into, leadership roles where not necessarily that you're leading a group of people, but just leading yourself, being a self-starter and a self-starter, I guess says it, right?
Yeah, it's funded by the city's neighborhood service department, which is volunteerism. And Fort Lauderdale has a lot of people who are here on the retired side with huge amount of ability and a huge amount of time. And the city could really benefit from people who choose to show up to their city and deliver back some of their time in a meaningful way. And so that neighborhood service department or office looks to activate intentional volunteers through the city. So part of this program came up by activating intentional mentors for youth to become mentors of future leaders. So we built the instructional part about being or helping the next generation learn what a leader is, so we could couple it with some baby boomer type mentors that could share some of their wisdom, step boldly into volunteering, and volunteer with the next generation so that everybody wins. That the youth, the kids in high school, learn the fundamentals of leadership that may not be taught to them already based on the curriculum that they're in, and insist that they do a community service project, because the values this program teaches is integrity, service, and excellence. And that coupling or putting all that together creates the opportunity for the city to see there's this untapped brilliance both in its older residents and its youth, that when they work together, there is an opportunity to show up and do something bigger. And so is it government's responsibility? No. Is it a wise use of tax money to change or amplify the impact? Partly because for every volunteer, they contribute 3 or 4 times their value than in pay, meaning if they have some expense, so $1 of expense generates $3 of benefit to the city, and people stay focused and living lives of purpose. I mean, everybody wins in it.
Right.
Why should that have to come from government? Shouldn't. I'm glad it did, but couldn't it also come from someone else who has the resources to make it happen? Yeah. So is that a progressive use of our government? I think so. And it's one that insists on a high return on every dollar they spend. Also very cool to see. Not always what we see in government.
Right.
So, I mean, I think, could we be creative enough to see where the applications for governments to reach out and do amazing things? And maybe this holiday could be the poke in the chops, you know, to say, hey, rethink this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's kind of the idea. So you're building the framework down there in Fort Lauderdale, and hopefully you can get, promote that idea and get other cities, adopting that and really start, making a difference through the whole country.
Yeah, the city I know is trying to create a template on how to create volunteerism in a significant way in a city, so that it could be replicated across the across the country, because the aging boomers, there's 60 million aging boomers who are going to have some time on their hands and a whole lot of expertise. What might they do in order to stay active and focused and living lives of purpose, even if they're not actively in the workplace? And
right.
So there's huge opportunity for that.
Yeah, and once you get that framework built, even if it's not necessarily a government, that could be something like a program like Bill
and Melinda Gates. That'd be a great funding source for something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Boy Scout or not Boy Scouts. Well, there were Boy Scouts of America, but I was thinking of
Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, Boys and Girls Club. So
yeah, YMCA and stuff like that.
Yeah, something like that, like a program for them, and they're, they're big enough and funded well enough to be able to support that. So that's, and the great thing about it in America is you have those two possibilities. You can have government that can provide these programs for those that can't afford them, and then you can have businesses and corporations to do it, and then they get that tax benefit. So it's a win-win for everyone. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I I apologize so much because I've been reading, I guess, so much sort of rebellious stuff, and I mean, most recently I've been reading Screw Business as Usual by Richard Branson. So it's amazing because I don't feel contrarian. I just feel like there's some energy flowing inside me that says there's just a lot of potential for change, and if I'm gonna wear American pride, I want it to mean way more than it already does. And I guess maybe that's my that's why I celebrate what Fort Lauderdale is doing, with UJ, and that's wonderful. And then then I have a flashback of seeing a sign in Fort Lauderdale that says "Don't feed homeless people." Right. I mean, so it's just, I mean, we are in a true phase of inquiry, and I mean, and I don't understand why I have such a perfectionist view of government, and maybe I can come off of my impatience or whatever. I don't know what it is about my impatience right now, but when just getting back to the Supreme Court thing, I get how much of a celebration it is, and then in the same breath, the very same breath for me, I'm like, why did it take until 2015? And of course, I watched the movie about the guy who cracked the Enigma, and
Sure.
to think that a mind like that was basically put on meds to, like try to, get him to be different than he was born. Like I'm just sad that like in the very same breath that I celebrate that we've come to this point, it just I mean, like, I guess that's the point as we grow up, is like there's not like one clear emotion. Like, I mean, pride is not just pride, because like, even the Declaration of Independence was written by people who owned other people, So like, I mean, like, these are, kind of amazing, hypocrisies that we're gonna need to deal with and have really open conversations around. So.
No, and I think you're right, Eric, to feel a range of emotions in that, because just because we decide on something doesn't mean we've done it right. I mean, there's been a whole lot of, I mean, I take Obama's perspective on whether he believes in marriage equality. That was a migration or a progression to get there. And I think maybe there's the disappointment saying, well, how could that possibly, in any mindset in our country, expect that some people are less worthy than other people? And so that we're slow about that. And we have a horrible history on being really slow at looking at somebody saying they're not as good as someone else. And even, with the decision that was made, the instant response back was no. It's the fact that you made that decision means I'm not going to comply with it. There are still levels of I'm better than you, or I'm different than you, or I'm right and you're wrong. And that we get to say it is cool. I watched, Facebook light up with everybody put, themselves in a rainbow color. Cool. And now I noticed everybody's taking them off. Okay, cool. It happened. Boom. And I saw the vitriol go on both sides for anybody who didn't agree with anybody. But for the most part, I noticed that they contained it to Facebook. And a whole lot of editorials. Great. Let's use the power of the word to express an opinion. And could we be better? My challenge anytime we make these kinds of things is, are we asking the question, what would make us better? And if at the end of this we think we're better, even it means it's different than what I thought, then maybe we should migrate. And so I think the invitation to our kids to realize that life isn't complete, that life is a series of nexts. In fact, I call it nexting. What is your life nexting? I just want to know what you're going to do next. And in that,
are you supposed to pull over when you next as well?
No, no, nexting is fine to do on the road. Yeah. You can do nexting on the road. But
you're not texting your dad, you're nexting.
I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next in life. I think anyway that it reminds us, our kids, to be a little bit patient, and maybe that's for you, Eric, too. That how are you patient in a imperfect process? A family's imperfect, a kid's imperfect, our government's imperfect. That doesn't mean we give in to it. It just means it's not done yet. It's the bread that's not quite cooked yet. So leave it in a little longer. And what else could it be? I don't know, too many metaphors in there, but I think that if we remind ourselves that though we're in a holiday that's supposedly talking about something as big as pride, I think it's an evolution to be in that space. And we should be proud for what it is that we have, even if we don't agree with all of its pieces. That in the total, we're actually still pretty remarkable, and I'd love it if people would remember that this weekend more than what's wrong with us.
Well, it's the gratitude aspect of life, right? It's just focus on.
What you focus on grows, so focus on the positive instead of the fact that you're disappointed about something.
Well, I mean, and I think just, also just the opportunity to bring it back to interdependence, and let it evolve. I mean, just because something, in the 1776, happened, doesn't mean that the holiday means the same thing. I mean, we know what happened to Christmas, like like how many people really know why everyone's getting presents, So, I feel like, we we are currently writing revisionist history as we go. You know, like we are. I mean, I guess the revolution is being televised. You know, and I feel like we get to admit that we are part of it. You know, so I mean, there's just so much opportunity to, yes, celebrate and you know, come together with friends and family and smile, you know, and know we've got a long road ahead of us, and you know, and I guess just like even breathe in the irony. Not even, I don't know, irony's not even the right word, but you know, we policied away, you know, we allowed people of color to vote 30 years ago, and yet, you know, something happened 2 weeks ago that says that we didn't end racism when we, you know, when we voted for people of color to have votes, you know. So, and I guess we're also probably learning, you know, that, you know, now all people can marry. And I mean, just getting back to the whole nexting, you know, I've seen a meme in the conservative world saying, okay, well, now what's next? What soon will no longer be sacred, you know, in how I grew up with my Christian values, you know, that's going to be obliterated by a governmental decision, you know. And so, like, that's another nexting, you know. I mean, like, I don't know if any of you have seen this meme, but, you know, like, I've been pretty sensitive to Facebook of late. So I don't know. What are your all thoughts?
Yeah, I've kind of gotten to a point where I work on Facebook all day, so I don't tend to. So
Communication, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't go on Facebook anymore. The news.
That's amazing. That's your office.
I know. It's weird. And I was on it like all day, all the time for like 3 years. So it's kind of weird. But what's interesting though is I'm completely disconnected to like the day-to-day conversation kind of stuff, and I only catch the major highlights. And like that shooting that happened at the church, didn't hear about it for a week until like almost a week after it happened. That was like 4 days, so, which is like a lifetime when it comes to social media, right? So I'm not tuned into any of that. I got really turned off on the news because everything I was seeing on the news was negative, and I got tired of it. It was like I would watch it and feel like I need to go take a shower and like rethink my life, you know. So I stopped watching that. The other, I only watch certain things on TV, and I try to make sure that, you know, if I'm watching something like I love reality, not reality, like documentaries, but I got to be careful on the type of documentaries I watch.
The old reality TV.
Right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, statements about what's true rather than scripted truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't know. I was really, really behind Ron Paul. I think, what was that, 2012 when he was running? No, it was 2008 was the year I was like all behind Ron Paul. I made signs. I went to all these like town hall meeting things, and I donated money to his campaign. I loved him, and I followed that. He was running for a spot on the Republican Party. He had raised more money than any other party member. He was leaps and bounds ahead of any of these other potentials. And they're going and going and going through the race, and they're just dogging him and dogging him and dogging him. And talking to people, I'm out, you know, because I'm out there like on the streets, vote for Ron Paul. They're like, why would we vote for Ron Paul? Like the major voice that I heard back was, why vote for Ron Paul? He has no chance in winning. You turn on the TV, and that's exactly what they're saying on CNN. he doesn't have a chance to win, so why waste your vote? You know, and I'm like, why do people think like that? Like, that's, to me, that's the whole idea of a broken system. So I have like a whole negative perspective on like how much control we the people actually have in our political system right now. So I kind of quit following politics, and the fact that these decisions are being made, it's great, but at the same time, I kind of have a similar feeling to Eric, is kind of like it's a little late for all that now, and it's kind of like, well, it's about time, government, that you catch up with what's going on with the rest of the country. I wish that things could be changed, but as of right now, it seems like no matter what we the people want, the government's just going to do what they choose to do. So I kind of shut that off as well, and I don't tap into it, and I don't get involved, and I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed in.
Someone seems a little grumpy.
Well, I mean,
I try not to be, and I'm trying not to be negative, but I feel like the majority of America is kind of in the same boat as I am.
And I think the perspective that you all brought to the table, that, you know, I haven't lived anywhere else but here. I haven't stamped my passport yet. So all I know is that, yes, like, you know, most of the time when I wake up, I am grateful to live in a country where I can disagree, and in a way, you know, the more of a humanist I become, the more impatient I become with the lag, and, you know, just, it seems at least, you know, I don't know, 2,000 years too late, you know, but whatever. I mean, like, and then if I think, oh wow, we're only, you know, 200 and some years old, you know, as a country, you know, whatever that means, then maybe I can muster up more pride, you know. I mean, it's just, especially with the technology and the globalization of so much, I just, you know, I think it's a better question to ask our kids what it means to be an American than to try to teach them, you know, what I think it means. So I'm excited for this show, and I'm grateful for this show for bringing to life that inquiry. And, you know, as like curmudgeon-like as our energy is right now, we're not going to be shot for being a curmudgeon. And I guess what you're all saying is that there are other countries where I might be. So I can be proud about still being alive and disagreeing as much as I do right now. So.
Well, I'll share a quick mob story. You guys want to hear this mob story?
Sure.
So my stepmom was in Italy, and she was dating this guy that was kind of a known mobster. And not my stepmom, this lady that my stepmom knew.
Of course.
And she was like really beautiful and all of these things like that. You know, when you think of like a gorgeous Italian woman, that's what this chick was. But she's dating like this high up mobster guy. And I guess she tried to break up with him, and then a few days later, she committed suicide jumping off of her building. Yeah. And then, you know, police station blows up, a couple bridges blow up. Whatever.
Okay, well, my part of Italy isn't quite like that. We spend more of our time shopping and eating food, which we are really grateful for.
Right. And that's not to say that's today. That was back in, you know, the early mid-90s when they were having a lot of mob issues. So
yeah, and maybe that's a reminder, Eric, that for someone who hasn't traveled out yet, that these other countries have their own share of things like we do, where we can't seem to pull ourselves together because one side's pulling east and one side's pulling west, and then somebody has a meltdown and then decide to blow up a bridge. So, you know, other places do that. How then do we encourage our kids to stay calm in disagreement. And I think this past week was a beautiful week to show that you don't need to go to either extreme in order to be heard here. You don't have to be the loudest one yelling on how your rights were taken away, and now, you know, the only people who suffer here are Christians, or the other one that, you know, finally everything is beautiful and rosy. It isn't. These are tough migrations towards understanding what it means to self-actualize, because there really isn't a rule book or a guidebook. We kind of figure it out on the way. Mm-hmm. And that means everybody and their brother are going to have an opinion about it. And couldn't we, you know, how might we use this opportunity to help our kids see that we still do an awful lot right, and the times that we don't, so what's the lesson? I mean, to me, I think it's the same thing when a kid disobeys. You know, at the end, you know, you knew what the expectation was, so you know what the consequence is, so don't be surprised about the consequence. But the bigger question I have for you is, so what did you learn here? And how will the next time be better? And I think this is what the nexts are all about, you know. How is the next one a little better? And I don't think it is, Chris, by turning off the news. I think sometimes the news, you know, needs to hear that you need to balance off with a couple of positive things too before all of us jump off the bridge together. Because the world just isn't that bad. And I know that bad news sells better than good news, but what do you do then to fill your news with a balance? Mm-hmm. So that you don't have to turn off the negative, because the negative stuff is telling you stuff that needs work. So don't ignore it. And the same with the kids. I hear kids talk about this all the time. I just tune it out. I just watch cat videos and game all the time. Well, really? Is that your world? Well, the other world is so mean. Okay, so know what's mean about it and decide some things you want to do to change it. That's what news is for. I remember I had the exact same perspective when I bailed on all the news. Like, I am tired of going to bed upset with the world and not catching my breath that every day is this awful place. And someone said to me, but if you tune it out, then you don't know what's true. And if you don't know what's true, you won't make it better. So, okay, so balance it.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I mean, I know we all have hard stops at 2. I just feel like, you know, we also have this thing as humans, you know, that where our lizard brains, you know, over magnify the bad news. Yep. So, like, we've got this, you know, this channel, you know, that supplies us with everything that our lizard brain wants to then cast a huge picture on what's wrong with the world. But that's really not truth, you know. I mean, like, the books that I read, I mean, as curmudgeon-like as my energy may sound right now, like, I am ridiculously optimistic with being a global citizen. I'm just, you know, I'm not relying on the U.S. government to be the bringer of the good news that I'm waiting for. You know, I mean, they've got lots of catching up to do if they're going to stay at all relevant in this new world. That being said, you know, it's just, you know, what is truth? And, you know, I feel getting back to the celebration that's about to happen this weekend, that is truth. You know, like, when we come together with our families and talk, you know, with the people we care most about, that's where the celebration is. That's where the pride is. That's what makes this holiday this holiday. And it's not the burgers, it's not the hot dogs, and, you know, it's not even the fireworks, as much as I appreciate them. It's that we do get to take this time to come together and be with each other and ask these questions. And as modern dads, we can challenge it. We can push the question forward, and we can say, what is this all about anyway? And I guess the other thing is, you know, and I think it would be a great topic for a future show, is like, how do we disrupt things with reverence and appreciation and gratitude?
Yeah.
You know, because I am really wanting to disrupt things and not do anything incrementally anymore. And I also want to be thankful for the history that brought this possibility here. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting when you take a look at some of the biggest disruptions in history was like the invention of the car, you know, the invention of the airplane, but then the fact that massive transportation, and then yet now we look at life and we're like, disrupt. You know, you use that word disruption, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, but that disruption creates all these bigger and grander opportunities, right?
Well, isn't this whole holiday one big disruption? I mean, we completely disrupted the British from thinking they were going to own us. And look what came from it. So
Yeah,
it's a
started
series of
something
wise
completely.
disruptions. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you know, I want to thank you guys for coming on. Jay Forty, thank you so much. Eric Lehman, thank you so much. This has been the Modern Dad Council today. Happy 4th of July. And God bless. We'll see you guys